Well, since I only hit my 120th month this month,
This month?
I knew that they wouldn't take the form, but I actually did send the form in January because I was worried about the new administration coming in. And so, even though I knew I wasn't going to hit my 120th month till March, I sent it in January. So maybe if they sat on it for a little bit, if they decided not to take those anymore, that my form would still be there.
Okay, well, I'll give you some good news in that regard as well. I would consider reapplying now that this is actually the month. That's why I wanted to ask, because they state pretty explicitly that you need to wait until that 120th month would be the month that you get credit for. However, if you go in and apply, I wanted to make sure that when you do so, that you include this specific language. And they mention this on the site itself, but what they don't mention is like how adamant they are about having this language in the actual buyback request. This sentence says, and I quote, "I have at least 120 months of approved qualifying employment and I am seeking PSLF or TEPSLF discharge through PSLF buyback. Please assess my eligibility for PSLF buyback." As random and as arbitrary as that sounds, if you do not have this sentence in your buyback request, they will not honor it. So I want to make sure, I think you're on the right track in terms of submitting that request. But when you do it for this month in March, I want to make sure that you include this specific language, because otherwise, once they process it, it could be the difference between them honoring the request and not honoring it.
Okay.
All right. Now, the next steps in that request, and I have no idea how long it will take. We've had some people when the program was first issued where they got it done in like a month, and then we've had others who submitted it around the same time and still haven't heard back. But in terms of what you can expect from communication, be clear that the communication will not come from your actual student loan servicer. So there's not really a method to check the status of that buyback request, because this is offered by the Department of Education. It's not offered by Mohila, which is who has your loans. So no need to call them, no need to email them. They're not going to have any information as to their request. If it is honored, you will eventually get communication directly from the Department of Education. And what they will do is they will send you a buyback agreement. So it's functionally a contract where they're going to tell you, here's all the information that we need to calculate what you would have paid during the periods of time that you missed. So for those 4 months, I think that you said that were not a part of that save forbearance, I would, try to start tracking down the tax return for that year, because the save forbearance is pretty straightforward. I would imagine that you have access to your most recent year or two's tax return. But those 4 months that you're missing, what year did that occur?
I think 2018 and 2019.
Okay, so I would go and start tracking down your 2018 and your 2019 tax return. In case you are unaware of how to do that, how you can do it is you can actually go to the IRS website. They will allow you to create a profile. And if you create that profile, they will give you a kind of a summary tax transcript of those past 2 years. But you can also request the full tax return itself. So start tracking down that 2018, 2019 tax return, because what they will do is they will calculate your discretionary income for those years so that they can calculate a payment under the income-driven repayment plans. The next step will be they will figure out what is essentially, for all the income-driven plans, the lowest payment that you would have made. And they will ask you to make that payment to satisfy each month of the buyback agreement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll get that agreement. You'll start working through the process of submitting that tax information, calculating your payment. Once that agreement is enacted, you have 90 days from the time it's enacted to make the full payment. It doesn't have to be a lump sum. It doesn't have to be any set increment per se. They may say like, hey, we can charge monthly, but just from the day 1 to day 90, that bill that they're asking you to pay, it has to be zeroed out by that 90th day. Otherwise, the agreement is void. Tracking with me? All right. Before we move forward, I do think that is the right path to take with these two loans. But do you have any questions about the details of that program before we move to the rest of your loans?
I do. I have two questions. Since I have other loans that don't qualify, are they just gonna? I was worried that they might just kick out the buyback agreement completely because they would see that those other loans aren't even close. Will they
No,
take it piece by piece?
they will take it piece by piece. And this is something that we come across, and it actually speaks to what we're going to talk about, in terms of how to handle the rest of those loans. This is where we have people where they will come to us and we'll have to weigh whether it's worth just trying to have those separate student loans forgiven or whether they should consolidate all of their loans, right? Like, hey, I have these two loans that are really close, but I have these other set of loans that, don't have much credit. Maybe I should just consolidate them. I would take my chances with them just forgiving the two loans, which they will do. We have seen it happen. And the reason that I would do that at this particular time has to do with the court cases that have wrapped up SAVE and all this litigation. As a part of those court cases, and I actually think that I have the page here, so let me share my screen again. We've talked about this on the podcast, but there's a ton of court cases that are currently going on that impact the SAVE plan, but they also impact essentially any legislation regarding student loans or any program that was created by the Department of Education as opposed to Congress. And that's really important because one of the things that the previous administration did when it comes to consolidating student loans is they changed the method of applying forgiveness credits to consolidated loans. Prior to the change, what would happen would be that if you had loans and you had paid on those loans for 12 years in one case, maybe 15 years in another case, and you consolidated them together, you would lose all of your credit towards income-driven repayment plan forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness. So you would be going from 12 years, 15 years to 0 years of credit. So it was really punitive to consolidate. What the previous administration did was they changed it and they said, if you consolidate, we're going to look at your student loan balance for each respective loan and how many years credits you have for each of those loans. And we're going to give you credit for the weighted average. Weighted average is a really unnecessarily complex financial term, but the premise of it is if I consolidate loans and I owe different amounts, the loan that weighs the most, meaning that I have the biggest balance on those loans, the amount of forgiveness credit I have is going to shift towards the bigger loans. So an example I would give is if you owe $200,000 worth of student loans and $50,000 of that has 20 years worth of credit, but the other 150 has 1 year worth of credit, the weighted average is going to shift towards that 1 year because it's the heavier number. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, the problem is the previous administration created that, but they created it through the Department of Education. So as a result of the court ruling that has put all of that on pause, one of the things that they have put on pause is giving the weighted average credit towards consolidated loans. So there has not been much that I've seen to verify how they'll handle it, but my concern would be if you try to consolidate these loans to kind of pull up the ones with lower credit, that they might reset your payment credits to 0 as opposed to giving you the weighted average. So to me, I don't know that that's a risk that I would be willing to take until we have a little more clarity.
Yeah.